food, because I think we all know that issues with food aren't really about food.
Hmm.
And post-recovery is when you can manage those binges on your own. It's not about not having those urges, to binge or to purge, because yeah, they will be there, but it's more about learning how to manage them.
Welcome to the Binge Breakers podcast. I'm Jacqueline. I am here to teach you how I overcame bulimia and my binge eating disorder, and how you can too. Through simple steps of mind management, repairing your relationship with yourself, understanding your habits, and intuitive eating.
Disclaimer, this recording is not intended to be used as medical advice, nor is it advice from a doctor. I am a coach, a recovery coach, and I offer advice from my own experience and my clients. But please, if you think you are in need of medical help, seek it immediately. We'll also be talking about subjects such as binging and purging, depression, and other sensitive topics. So if those trigger you, please listen at your own discretion. Hello, podcast listeners. Today I have a guest on the podcast, Anna. She is a food freedom and body image psychologist, and she's known on Instagram as healthy.mindclub. And the thing that I enjoyed a lot about Anna and our conversation is actually when I first sat down with her to discuss before the podcast what we wanted to talk about. She mentioned that she is 10 years recovered from binge eating and bulimia. And I was like, oh, cool. It's always good to have perspectives from people who've been recovered for longer than me and for quite a while. 10 years is a long time. But she said due to some struggles she had last year, she experienced more urges than she had ever had in a while in her own recovery. And I was like, oh my gosh, I need to talk to this person more, because people think it's just a linear journey and you've been recovered for 10 years, you've never binged and purged in 10 years, you're never going to struggle again after that. And that was not the case for her. But she had quite a lot of unique perspectives on not having this perfect recovery and what realistic recovery looks like. Not only being recovered, but the process of it. And so we talked back and forth about that at the end of the podcast. And also we talked a lot about beauty ideals and how they're not things that you were just born with, and they're not your own ideas in lots of ways. And just the disparity that you can find with those things and how that manifests into eating disorders, obviously. So it's a really interesting conversation about non-perfect recovery methods, and I really enjoyed it. So I hope that you like this podcast episode. As always, you can find Anna's information in the description below. Also, we still have a few spaces left open for my group coaching program. Our 8-week cycle, our next one is starting next week, February 27th. So if you are interested in joining, the next one won't open till late April for spots. So definitely don't miss your chance. It's been a wonderful time working with group members for that program, and I'll tell you more about how we wrap things up next week. All right, bye.
I want to start out with kind of an edgy question, but what is frustrating you most in the eating disorder recovery community right now?
I think, to be honest, it's like some people present those unrealistic recovery journey standards kind of thing. I think like we live in such like fast-paced society, and we're used to getting like everything very quickly. But like recovery, if you like really want to recover and get deeper into your like issues with food, like it does take time, it's a process, it's not a quick fix. So I think like kind of some people are promoting this, like, yeah, okay, if you struggle with binge eating, just don't keep certain foods at home. But we all know it doesn't work. If you feel like binging, you're gonna get that food, so
That's true.
yeah.
Yeah. I think sometimes there's merit to removing low-hanging fruit, like maybe don't have 3 cakes sitting in front of you when you want to binge, but it's not the only solution, and it's not just one thing. Unrealistic recovery ideals, I think that's something we wanted to talk about, is people have promote like these quick fixes and very fast recovery times. I guess asking you, what is a realistic recovery?
I think it really depends on the person, and I know that from a client's perspective, it can be like hard to get their heads around it, but I think, yeah, it's very kind of personal, and it also depends on your root cause and how many root causes you have, because, you can have more than one. So let's say for me, it was struggling definitely with low self-esteem, high criticism, being a people pleaser, so I had to work on each and every of those root causes for quite a while, but I would say like definitely few months, like at least. And some people are in recovery for a year, 2 years, and that's also fine, you know?
Yeah. Well, and when you define, I think it's helpful for the audience because it's all subjective, and I guess there's a clinical definition of what defines as in recovery versus post recovery. But for you, how do you define in recovery and out of recovery?
I think out of recover or in recovery is when you're still like kind of learning alternative behaviors to binge eating and kind of exploring like those deeper issues that are beneath food, you know, because I think we all know that issues with food aren't really about food. And post recovery is when you can manage those binges on your own. It's not about not having those urges, you know, to binge or to purge, because yeah, you know, they will be there, but it's more about learning how to manage them.
I really like that, actually. It's not what I was expecting you to say, because I find sometimes I tell people with post recovery that the urges are less frequent and they're less intense, but they'll still be there. But I like that you say it's not even about are the urges gone or not. It's are you able to manage them on your own?
Yeah,
That's
what
really
did
cool.
you expect me to say?
I I don't know. I thought you'd expected you to say maybe like oh, urges are decreased and stuff like that, and your behavior's more normal around food and that sort of stuff, which I think you would agree with too. But I like the
Yeah,
defining thing of the urges might still be there, but you can manage them. So I think
yeah,
it's realistic.
because it's again still being about like realistic about recovery. So like I recovered, or I don't know, like about 10 years ago, and just last year I also got urges. You know, I was going through some like stressful time, and I like, yeah, it really surprised me, you know, that after all these years I got those urges. But I think being aware of that it's not about, you know, being like um urge free. It's just about, yeah, knowing that it's something that may return, and when you're prepared for that, you can deal with it better.
Yeah, yeah. I want to ask you about your story too, but I first want to ask you,
Mhm.
how do you deal with urges? What do you think is the best way?
I think it's like to monitor your emotions first of all, because I think for me, binging was like a way to deal with my emotions, or actually way of avoiding dealing with my emotions. So I'm really aware of that. And yeah, like, you know, lots of therapists, psychologists say you have to feel the feelings, you know, learning how to sit with your emotions, how to listen to them, and but also all the like nutritional side of things is also very helpful, like to eat regularly, not to restrict, not to count calories, to be physically active as well, because you know physical activity also helps like to reduce stress, you know, and tension, things like that. So for me it's like maintaining overall what you would call a healthy lifestyle, but it's not a healthy lifestyle in terms of, oh, I want to lose weight and I have to do it. It's kind of doing it out of like self-love and respect, really, and being in touch with your body, definitely.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, there's a lot, but I agree with the eating enough and the nutrition, and then also the being in touch with your emotions and body. You know, have you heard this before? I hear a lot of people tell me in the beginning of recovery, they're like, I don't, it's just a habit. And which I've said before, it can be looked at as just a habit, but like, it's just a habit. I'm not emotional. I'm not binging because of emotions. And then I find as it goes on, there really is a lot of emotions beneath the surface that they're just numbing. Do you find that as well?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Mhm.
I think many people don't want to see it. And like we said at the beginning, right? We kind of focus on issues around food because that's what we think we have, right? It's like
Mhm.
food. I can't control myself around food. I eat too much or then I purge. But then when you, yeah, get deeper into it, it's like, yeah, maybe there are some emotions underneath all of that.
Mhm. Well, and the urge itself is an emotion too. Like even if
Yeah.
you're just binging because of the urge is an uncomfortable emotion that you have to feel. And so
Mm.
people like they think, oh, I'm sad and that's because I binge, and it's like it's not that simple or cartoony. Yeah. I
Mm-hmm.
used to think, I don't know about you, if you can relate. So I grew up around some people that were just, they always struck me as very emotional. And so I always didn't want to be highly emotional growing up. And that transferred into adulthood. And I think the resistance to feel my emotions, and I thought I should be this stoic person that just, and to never have any emotions, but you had control of your emotions. But, you know, then I'm like, why do I binge and purge and have this obsession with food? And it's like, now I'm, even though I think I have good control over my emotions, I'm a much more emotional person than I ever wanted to believe I was.
Yeah, but I think what I learned over the years and also when I was studying psychology is that it's not about not allowing yourself to have those emotions or to feel those emotions, because you can feel them as intensively as they come, and
Mhm.
they have that like important information for you, but it's more about how you express your emotions, it's like kind of learning that, I don't know, you're at work and let's say your boss makes you angry, like you're not gonna shout at them, are you? Right? It's like,
Mhm.
but you still have a right to feel those emotions. And I think that's what many people, or we're never really taught that, to that we are allowed to feel any emotions and there are no good or bad emotions. They're all important. No?
Yeah. Yeah. And I like what you said about them being information, even if your emotions are completely, I think sometimes emotions can feel so intense or off compared to what it's emotional about, but it's still a feedback from your body. And if you just listen to it, it's helpful. So tell us a bit
Mhm.
about your story. You recovered 10 years ago. And I love that you said you still experience urges under times of stress. That just gives people, it'd be helpful to ask like how you manage that. But first, let's go back to your story. How did it all start? What horrible thing happened to you? How did you recover? All that sort of stuff.
Yeah, so my root cause was low self-esteem. So my
Mm,
issues with food started when I was a teenager, it was like early 2000s in Poland, and this kind of body image or the standard was this like very skinny kind of
yeah.
Kate Moss figure. And yeah, I was, I think, 13, 14, puberty hit. I was like, it was like early spring, and I remember that moment very vividly because I wanted to put on trousers that I had worn a summer before, and like they wouldn't fit, they were like easily two sizes too small. And I was standing there in front of that mirror and I hadn't even noticed anything, I was like just fine with about my body. And then I was standing in front of that mirror and I thought to myself, oh, you're fat, you need to
Mm.
lose weight, And yeah, then I did
And
my first crash diet and that's how it started.
uh, I it's sad. Like a lot of us have the similar story, and sometimes I think people that haven't experienced that, they're like, "Oh, what was you, teenager, uncomfortable with your body, blah blah blah." But it does hit you, especially when you see images everywhere, people in your life that confirm for you that that is not okay, and then to see yourself going through that change and label yourself as that, and then start the obsession, just breaks my heart. But yeah. So how long did you struggle with for, and how intense? It's probably intense, but like I don't know, what was the worst of it for you?
Well, after doing that first diet, my weight would like cycle over the years. And then when I was 20, I think so, 7 years later, I moved to Scotland and then I lost a bunch of weight just because, it was new environment. I was busy with other things. Then I put it back on. And then I was already studying psychology and I kind of, again felt like, oh, maybe I should lose some weight again. And then I did a 2 week fast. So
Mhm.
fast slash cleanse kind of thing. So I wouldn't eat any solid foods for 2 weeks. And that was the beginning then of binge eating and then later on bulimia.
Yeah.
So that was, I think, the worst.
It is always, well, not always, I shouldn't say that, but I find a lot of people, there's that, for me too, there was this extreme moment of like barely eating anything for a few months on end. And then suddenly, 3 months later, I was bulimic. It's just like, it's not, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out how that might have happened.
Mhm.
Yeah. Well, can I ask, what will, you already gave a lot of great advice on managing urges and stuff like that, but how did you recover?
Yeah, I already like I was bulimic for about 3 years and I was like super embarrassed about it because I was studying psychology at that time and I kind of
Yeah.
felt like, man, you should know better. What are you doing? So I was like feeling really embarrassed. I never spoke to anyone about it. So for me, even to start Healthy Mind Club and kind of share my journey, I really had to like dig in my memory because all that time was kind of like classified, closed, and like kind of a closed chapter, and I moved on from it. But yeah, I was already kind of feeling like maybe half a year before I started my recovery, I was already kind of thinking like, man, I just don't want to live like this anymore, because it's like really takes over your life. You feel like you can't live normally, like you can't eat normally. I was like either binging and purging or dieting or planning another diet, and it was just like awful, awful like that. And then like, yeah, about 6 months before, I was already like kind of having those feelings like I don't want to live like this anymore. And then I went to Thailand for 2 weeks. It was actually in January 2014, so like really
Oh,
10
okay.
years ago. And I'm not saying you have to go on an exotic trip to recover, but for me, it was that I was then binge and purge free for 2 weeks. And then I came back, and that was like really this mindset shift for me because all those years I was so embarrassed of my eating disorder, so ashamed. I never spoke to anyone about it. Like I would just was beating myself up because of it. And then I remember I came back from that holiday. I was sitting in the kitchen and I thought to myself, like, well, what if this eating disorder is there to support you? Like in a very toxic, it's like this kind of toxic friend that you have, that you
Yeah.
don't want to be friends with anymore. But I was like, what if it's like there to, yeah, help you deal with your emotions or help you avoid dealing with your emotions, but like kind of what if that eating disorder has a bigger purpose, that it's not just something, a part of you that you want to get rid of? And that was this like really crucial moment for me because I made peace with that part of me. It wasn't something I wanted to get rid of anymore and something that I was ashamed of, but I started seeing it like, yeah, a bit differently.
Interesting. I think that's a crucial moment everyone needs to have in recovery because they in their eating disorder journey because they so badly don't want to admit that that's a piece of their identity and that this could
Mm.
possibly be helping them in some way. And they look at it as just this disgusting, inhuman, not a part of them at all. And it's like, wait, you're doing this for a reason. Look at it and see how it is a part of you and it's helping you. And I feel like for me, embracing the bingy side of me and the bulimia side of me,
Mm-hmm.
it's a really extreme trait of mine, but it's a powerful one too. And like I feel like a lot of traits that you have in bulimia can be good in different ways. And it is serving you. It does have a purpose. So when you can see
Mm-hmm.
why it's actually helping you, then you can alter your behavior and be like, well, how else can I help myself or let go of it or
Mm-hmm.
something? It's like it's an
Mm-hmm.
amount of accountability, I guess, that really helps with that.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, and just kind of like, yeah, making peace with it. And I actually had a little talk with my bulimia, literally, I spoke out
Nice.
loud and I said, yeah, okay, thanks for, helping me in for all these years, but I'm ready to let you go and I want to try something else, it's kind of like
Little
releasing it, but
breakup.
in peace. Yeah. Yeah, like
Yeah.
a little breakup talk. Yeah, you're still great, but just not for me. So,
Yeah. Yeah. I remember I didn't have a talk with it, but I was like, I don't, I'm okay with it, but I don't want this anymore. It was like a very mature moment of, because I had
mhm,
had that was 6 months earlier, kind of this acceptance moment of it being in my life, but then eventually having it without shame and just kind of doing it. I was like, I don't want to do this anymore. This is not me. And then being able to come at it from that place was very helpful.
mhm, mhm. Yeah, because when you think about it, like, if you're struggling with bulimia or binge eating, it like really takes over your life. Like for me, there was no day that I, either wouldn't binge or purge or just binge or at least think about it or plan another diet. So if you're kind of disconnected from this part of you. You're disconnected from this huge part of your life, actually, that is there every day, whether you like it or not, right?
Yeah, absolutely. That kind of brings me to another subject I wanted to ask you about, which is telling people about it. So you obviously were in a really hard position being a professional and then and studying psychology, like supposedly knowing everything and having imposter syndrome. So it kind of makes sense why you didn't want to speak to people, but what was your experience like actually opening up to people about it?
It was actually way more positive than I expected, but I opened up about it like kind of years after I recovered. So
Mm,
I didn't speak to anyone. I was still like too embarrassed and too ashamed of it. So I kind of recovered on my own. And then like, I don't know, a year, maybe a few years later, I spoke to people about it. And I think because it was something that I wasn't struggling with anymore, it was like kind of like, oh, just so you know, I used to struggle with bulimia and this and that. And they're like, oh, okay. And some people would ask some more questions, some just kind of accepted it.
yeah, it's crazy how much we think people care, and some people are like, oh, okay. That's the shit you have. Okay, cool. It's just like everyone has something. The only thing that it made me think about that is I hear a lot of people say, I'll tell people after I recover. And it's good to hear from you that, you can recover on your own without telling anyone. But I think it's just such an isolating experience. I always try to encourage people to tell someone, even when they're still in the depths
I
of it.
I wouldn't recommend trying to recover on your own.
Yeah, yeah.
Absolutely not. And for me, I think what helped me to do that was that background in psychology that I already had, because there we
Mm,
were actually learning like about emotions and like your childhood. And there, like I said, for me, that root cause was low self-esteem. So I could actually understand where it came from, so it was like a little bit different. But if I could turn back time and like go through my recovery again, I would definitely get help. Even if you're not ready to speak to your family member or a friend, at least speak to professional.
yeah. This is a side question, and I will get back to the other stuff, but I was just talking to someone about this who had pretty low self-esteem, and then they would act out because of that self-esteem. Are there any things off the top of your head that can help with low self-esteem in general? Because it's a big
Yeah,
thing people with
definitely.
bulimia have.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I think first of all, it's like kind of realizing that low, se- mm, that we're like kind of really tricked by the diet culture and media, social media and stuff like that, because they kind of bombard us with those images of these like slim or fit or certain looking people, and they present them always as like successful and happy and wealthy. And we kind of on this unconscious level, we kind of connect the dots, right? And so we think, okay, if I want to be happy, successful, and whatever else, I have to look like that. And this is where it comes from, because this low self-esteem and trying to lose weight, it's not really about those kilos or pounds per se. It's about feeling worthy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's about feeling that acceptance and almost validation from yourself and others that you are enough.
Yeah, and first step for me also was kind of realizing that those beauty standards, they're just standards, that I can be happy and I can actually accept myself and I don't know, be in anybody, that I don't have to look a certain way. And I think for many people who struggle with that, because I remember like reaching my dream weight and I wasn't any happier, and I
Yeah.
didn't feel super confident and successful. So that was already like this point where I was like, well, I don't think this will work as I think it will. So it's
Mm-hmm.
kind of like realizing that those ideas that you have, they're not yours, they're just kind of this projection from the society or the diet culture. And it's kind of like dissociating yourself from that.
Yeah, it's funny. Both times I've been at more of my dream weight, it's not that I enjoyed being at that weight for sure.
Mm-hmm.
And I liked how I looked, but it kept my world incredibly small. And it was a perception of me that was made by other people, like you're saying. And I
Mm,
find the more I just live through, okay, what do I want though? What do I enjoy? How do even like how I dress or look sometimes is like, am I dressing for myself? Am I looking this way for myself, or is it for other people? And like the more I try to find out authentically me, the more confident I feel because I'm not trying
mhm,
to fit myself into someone else's parameters. And like you said, they are just standards. And it's funny, I was thinking about how my mom, when I just visited her last week, and she was like, big butts are all craze right now. It's so weird how like people are obsessed with big butts. And I was like, it is kind of weird, Mom. You're right. Like, I don't know what. And she's like, that was not the case when we were kids. And then it's just so funny that it's like we obsess over trying to get these things, and then in 10 years it changes, or 20 years it changes, or it only fits this really small parameter. And if you're trying to get yourself to fit into that parameter, people that only validate you or care about you just on how you look, they're not the type of people that you want to hang out with. They're really, really toxic and have their own insecurities.
exactly, exactly. And I think realizing that is very, very powerful. First of all, that your worth is not tied to your weight. Like you
Mhm.
can feel worthy and be happy and live that life that you always wanted to live in your body that you're currently in. Like it doesn't matter as much as, the diet culture says it does. Hmm.
Yeah, I can just imagine people listening to this though that are in maybe like obsessed with their smaller body or like trying to like this weight. They're like, no, they've given up. Like I remember when I'd hear that stuff when I was in bulimia, I was like, they've just lost it. I can never do that. I think you have to have a complete and utter breakdown from that code, but then once you're on the other side, you're like, oh wow, I have so much more confidence. I can do so much more stuff, and like my world is not controlled by a number or being on a scale or something like that.
Yeah, and even like kind of asking yourself, even yeah, when you reach that perfect weight, and it's like, okay, how much does it cost me to look like this? Am I
Yes.
actually happy and am I living life to the fullest? Is that the price I'm willing to pay to look like that? Is that what life's all about? So
Yeah.
kind of like questioning those things a bit.
That's a good, yeah. Sometimes when people just won't let go of this weight ideal, I sit down with them and look, this is the weight you want to be at. This is exactly what's required to be at that weight. And you have to, if you want to, and I'm like, do you want to be running 8 miles a day and starving yourself and all these things? And, sometimes they're like, yeah. And I'm like, you need to think about that then. But if people are like, no, I don't want to do that. It's like, this is the reality then, unless you're going to try to do something crazy to your body, which probably won't work. So, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Thank you for answering all that. That was really interesting. To kind of wrap things up, I guess I always like to ask people, what if you could give one piece of advice for anyone struggling out there right now, what would you say?
Yeah, don't struggle alone and in secrecy,
Mhm.
definitely. And be realistic about that recovery. Remember that it's a process, it takes time, it's full of ups and downs, because I think, especially for people with binge eating or bulimia, we kind of, we lived with this all or nothing mindset, right? So it's this kind of like, either binging or dieting. So we have this black or white thinking. And I think then in the recovery, let's say you're binge and purge free for 3 days, right? And then you have like a bad day or something happens and you do end up binging and purging. It doesn't mean that all the progress you've made so far is gone. It's just
Mhm.
a part of recovery, because I think when you're stuck in this all or nothing mindset, then you will see it as, oh no, I failed. This makes no sense, right? I'm back at square one again, but you're
Mhm.
not.
Yeah, you are lapsing or engaging in those behaviors as a different person than when you started, and you're probably
Mm-hmm.
lapsing better if there was a way to say that. I just think every time you fail, I feel like you fail forward, and even it shouldn't even be looked at as a failure, but just for the sake of terms, when you have
Yeah.
that, you are feeling upwards, right? You're improved in how you kind of crash and burn. So
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
yeah, and I agree. I have a 8-week group coaching program, and a lot of people in there are doing really well, but even the people that are struggling or still having some behaviors and stuff, it's really cool to watch them experience their behaviors differently and learn from those behaviors differently than they did before. And they have not lost all their progress. They're making progress through having behaviors.
Yeah, and like celebrating those small wins, even if you do end up like in your recovery, even if you do end up binging or binging purging, and even if you're aware of what's going on in that moment, you're like, okay, you're still on this autopilot, you're acting on that urge, but at least if you know what's going on, that's already a huge success too, because next time maybe you will be able to even stop in the middle. And that's a huge success also.
It is, yeah. And people they
Mhm.
want to jump from 0 to 100, but that's how you get there, right? So there's a rare person out there that can go from the 0 to 100, but I think that they're missing a lot through just getting things automatically and perfectly. And
Mhm,
some things that
mhm.
I'm naturally good at, I don't then get to experience the grit of continually giving, like pushing forward anyway. And then when suddenly I come up with a challenge with that, then I don't know how to handle it. Because I'm like, this is always easy. Why isn't it easy? It's like it's not supposed to always be easy. You're supposed to struggle a little bit and get through it.
Yeah, exactly. And it's a part of the process too.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
is. Well, Anna, it's been really nice having you on. There was one other question I wanted to ask you, but I forgot about it. It was about something with your recovery, 10 years. Last thing. How did you
Mhm.
cope with urges this past year with all the stress that you had going on?
Yeah, I didn't expect them, I have to say, to come, but I already know, let's say, like my warning signals. So yeah, because of like some stressful situations, I wasn't eating right.
Mm-hmm.
So I was skipping meals, but it wasn't intentional. It just kind of happened. And then I noticed that I was like overeating in the evenings, and I was already like, okay, that's interesting. And then when I started feeling those urges to binge, I was like, okay, what emotions I don't want to feel right now?
Mm-hmm.
So kind of like again reconnecting, because for me, I realized that binging, purging was a way of avoiding to deal with my emotions or to feel them. So I would like ask myself, okay, what are you feeling right now? What is it about? What's underneath that urge? And then I would name that emotion and kind of sit with it, or go for a walk, go for a run, things like that. And yeah, I would listen to my body.
Nice. Just back to basics, basically. That's nice, but you were able to recognize it. Yeah. Oh, well, I'm glad that you're obviously probably still having stress and stuff like that, but I'm glad that you're through that and you're able to manage it well. And that it's just interesting for people to hear, especially people to hear 10 years in a recovery, that things can still happen and you could just use the same tools. Nothing has really gone wrong. And I met one person who was maybe 10 years plus recovery, and she's like, no, I've never had any urges and I never like not the eating disorder is completely gone. I was like, okay, sure, whatever you say. It's fine. It felt suspicious. But yeah,
Yeah, that's yeah.
it's
Yeah, but
sus.
I think when you're yeah, but I think when you're like kind of prepared for it, and again, like if you've made peace with that side of you, and then something really stressful or whatever, like major life change happens, because life changes are also part of root cause.
Hmm.
And then you kind of go into that default mode again. But when you're aware of it, and you know that, okay, this may happen, it's not like, oh, I'm free from binge eating and bulimia and I will never do that again. When you think like that, you kind of set yourself up to fail, I
You
think.
do. Yeah. There's this
Mm,
radical acceptance and like, okay, this is a piece of
mhm.
me. We are vulnerable to this. We got to watch it. Don't
Yeah.
be constantly scared of it, but just know that about yourself. Yeah. All
Hmm,
right.
hmm.
I'm gonna let you go, but thank you so much for being here. This is a really fun interview.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It was really
Oh,
fun for me too.
and where can people find you?
On Instagram, it's at healthy.mindclub, or on my website, healthymindclub.eu.
Awesome, cool. And are there any programs that you're offering right now or stuff that you're offering that you want people to know about?
Yeah, I'm doing currently one-to-one sessions. You can find them on my website, and I will be starting group programs from, I think, March, April this year. So there will be some info on the website as well.
Sweet. Yeah. I used to think like one-on-one is the holy grail, but group is so powerful. It's really good for people too. They're just both
It
have
really
such.
is.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, hey, that's exciting. People can find you there. Awesome. All right. We're going to say goodbye. Bye, everyone listening. Thank you for being here.
Bye.